Hey guys, Travis here, coming back to talk about a little bit of training. And this video is going to be specifically targeted to the majority, I think, of people out there that are training on their own or developing your own training program, watching videos like this on YouTube or hopping on Reddit and or other kind of social forums, asking a lot of questions, kind of find out, get an idea of what works and what doesn't, and then kind of going from there. And so there's a key mistake that I see a lot of these athletes make when they're setting up their own training program. And that has to do with kind of a loading and unloading pattern that you need in your training to create the best possible adaptation. And so what I'm talking about that is that you need to have a distinct difference between what I would call loading days and unloading days. And so I'll see a lot of people will say, well, I'm getting in 45 minutes a day of aerobic work. And if I see that athlete, I'm saying, well, you're getting 45 minutes every day doing the same thing. And the answer is usually yes, that they're trying to kind of get that volume in, or maybe every once in a while they'll throw kind of some kind of interval session in to kind of mix it up. But a lot of times people, or even friends, that'll say, oh, what should I do? Like, I'm going for runs, I'm getting in like 5 or 6 miles a day. Well, when I hear that, my first thought is, well, you don't want to be doing the same thing every day with your volume, all right? You want to kind of get a point where you're stressing the body and then unstressing the body and letting the body recover, all right? And I think a lot of the things that people, a big thing that people mistake in training and athletic training is that they see those workout sessions as what is making them faster. And that's not quite right, all right? So what makes you faster is, one, stimulating the body to make an adaptation and then giving it the opportunity to make that adaptation, all right? And so yes, the work that you're doing is making you faster, but if you're not pairing that work with an appropriate rest interval, then your body's not going to make the adaptation it needs to take full advantage of that training stimulus, all right? And that if you stress the body, it's going to find some way to adapt no matter what, all right? So we're very adaptable animals, and if you stimulate something and you stress the body in a way, then it's going to try to find a way to adapt to that stress so that it can handle that stress better in the future. But there are ways that you can maximize the quality of that adaptation, and that really comes in the rest, all right? And so if you're an athlete and you're out there and your days are very similar, let's go back to the athlete that says that they're doing 45 minutes a day to develop their aerobic endurance. Well, I would say to that athlete, you're gonna get a much better adaptation if you alternate days at 60 minutes and you work pretty hard on those 60 minutes, all right? And so that's not gonna be as a super comfortable effort. It's not gonna be super hard, but you're definitely kind of stressing the body and going just a touch out of your comfort zone. And then you're balancing that with the next day of 30 minutes, and that 30 minutes is very relaxed, very easy. It's basically just getting your body to move, all right? And so it's not only about kind of going longer and then shorter, and you're still averaging that 45 minutes on a daily basis, but you're overstressing the body with that 60 minutes, and then you're giving the body a lot of opportunity to adapt with that 30-minute session. And then when I talk to athletes and they're doing something like that, where they have longer days and then they have shorter days, and I'll see this with the youth athletes I coach a lot, is that the shorter days end up being their harder days. Like, so they'll be, let's say this athlete usually averages a 202 on their aerobic work, and they'll go, that 202 on their 60 minutes. And then on their 30-minute day, they'll be like, oh, well, it's only 30 minutes. I'm gonna go 159 or 2-minute split. But that's not the right approach, all right? And so what I'll tell my athletes a lot is that the longest aerobic session that you're doing within your microcycle being about a week's worth of training, and you can maybe say the longest you're doing within a month, that session should dictate your aerobic pacing for the rest of your training sessions. And I say this from the perspective of, I believe that your long aerobic work, your longest aerobic sessions should be your most aggressive aerobic sessions and should be your fastest, for two reasons. One is that usually with aerobic work, there's a little bit of negative splitting involved, and I'm not talking about going from a 208 down to a 158 over the course of the session. I'm talking about starting around a 204, 205, and by halfway through you're comfortably at a 203, and then after another 30 minutes you may be scooting around 202, high 201s. So in that sense, the longer you're going on a session, the faster your average split should be on that session, because you're slowly getting looser and warmer and your speed is just slowly coming down. And so with that, you're using your long sessions to kind of dictate that high-end training, that aerobic training pace. And so when you step into those shorter sessions, you want to make sure that you are going either at or slower than that pace. And coming back to what I was saying in terms of the alternating days of 60 minutes and 30 minutes instead of doing 45 minutes every day, is that, let's say that 60 minutes is your 202, that 30 minutes, make it maybe a 206, 207, all right? At least like 204, 205, all right? And so it should be comfortable, it should be relaxed. And if you want to make sure that you're still getting a sense that you're doing good work on that 30 minutes, then you can just bump the stroke rate down a couple beats, and that will naturally bring your split up, all right? So that your overall energy output is lower, but you're still getting a good power per stroke, a good sense of work. And then if we pull that into adding in anaerobic work during the week, and this is another pitfall that I see a lot of coaches do, especially at the youth level, and when I see it, I'm like, well, it's gonna be very easy for my crews to beat your crews on the races where it counts, because they're better adapted, better rested. And that is that every day is challenging. All right, and I don't think every day should be challenging. Certainly not challenging in the same way, not necessarily challenging in a physical way. Sometimes if you want to kind of keep your athletes tuned, you can kind of alternate whether that challenge is a physical challenge or a mental challenge on any given day. So alternate maybe a good hard interval session or a good long aerobic session with a very technical session with a lot of drills where the athletes are really forced to mentally focus on that effort at hand. So it can be challenging in different ways. But from the body sense, you definitely want to, like you're doing with your 60-30, instead of just doing 40 minutes all the time, it's also very important that you set up your weekly sessions in a way that you have work, you have stressing the body, and you have recovering from that stress on the body, all right? And so you don't want to say that, well, we're gonna do intervals this day, and then we're gonna do a 60-minute steady state the next day, and then we're gonna do a really hard technical session the other day, and then we're going back to intervals, and then we're gonna do another 60 minutes of steady state. Your athletes will get faster, when you're doing work like that. Essentially anytime you're doing work where you're not injuring or overtraining your athletes, you're going to adapt and you're gonna get faster. But when you're in a competitive environment, certainly as a coach, everybody is doing work. Everybody's, training their athletes on a daily basis. What really is going to set those great coaches apart from the good coaches is coaches that are able to maximize the quality of adaptation that their athletes are getting from those training sessions. And it may be counterintuitive, but the truth is that if you're scheduling definitive rest days within your microcycle, days that you're explicitly not stressing the body physically, then you're going to get a lot more training adaptation out of the days where you are working hard. And then in the long term, you're going to get better performance out of it. And you're also going to get an athlete that's a lot fresher, all right, because they haven't been stressed on a day after day after day basis, where their body is kind of more in a survival mode rather than induce a training stimulus, adapt to training stimulus and rest, induce a new training stimulus, rest and adapt. And so what I found is a lot of times with my coaching is that, the day-to-day training that the athletes that I had were not as stressful, as difficult as the day-to-day training of their competition. And during the regular season, our athletes would often fall a little short of those other athletes because they were just working consistently at a higher rate. But when it came time to get into a championship season and the important races, and we were able to kind of adjust and fine-tune our training to maximize performance out of those races, that almost across the board in all my years of training, that my athletes would rise within their local competition or even the regional competition compared to where they had been during the regular season in those final championship results, because they weren't under a constant training stimulus day to day during their primary season. They were constantly adapting, and that adaptation may have come initially at a slower rate, but it was able to carry them a lot farther because they weren't experiencing the same level of residual fatigue as their competition throughout that training season. And so at the end, it was much easier for them to kind of fine-tune, get those final hard sessions in, but also be fresh enough to be able to put out repeatable maximal efforts when it came to championship racing. And going back to kind of how people are training on their own, is that I think people look at steady state as their easy work, as their recovery days, and that's really not the case. Is that a good aerobic session is going to stress the body very similarly than a good interval session. It's just going to be stressing it in a different way, and it's stressing different energy systems. But overall, in terms of the fatigue that you're generating, you're going to generate very similar fatigue with a good hard 60 minutes of aerobic work as you are by doing, let's say, 7 by 3 minute intervals, with 4 or 5 minute rest. And even though those intervals, you're working much harder, and you're getting a lot more, lactate fatigue in those sessions than you are in your aerobic, but the volume of the aerobic, is balancing out the intensity of those interval sessions, and so that the fatigue you're generating with the body is very similar. And so, when I'm seeing other coaches setting up that training week, they have that, let's say, Tuesday's an interval day, Monday being a recovery day from the weekend of racing, Tuesday's an interval day, and then Wednesday will be a long steady state, and then Thursday will be another interval day, and then Friday can be a little bit of technical work and fine-tuning to get ready to race on the weekends. And those athletes are essentially, they're having 3 or 4 hard anaerobic days, because you should be counting your race sessions as your hard anaerobic days as well. And I would say, certainly from a younger youth athlete, generally 2 days a week where you're stressing, really stressing the system and pushing the body beyond what it's used to doing, should be enough to create a successful and linear training adaptation for that athlete moving into the future. And if you're getting into a more experienced athlete, and an athlete that has been training regularly for, let's say, 3 is kind of borderline, but definitely 4 years and above, then that athlete, should be able to be comfortable having 3 sessions a week that are really designed to kind of push beyond the comfort zone, the body's comfort zone, not only the mental comfort zone, but the body's comfort zone and what it's used to doing, to just kind of spark the body into saying, hey, I've got to adapt in some way in order to better handle this training load. And then you've got to back off on those other days. And again, you can successfully stress the mind and the body in alternating ways, all right? And so the body will recover, during a session that's a high intensity mental session, because you're focusing on technique. However, you also want to take a step back in that and analyze and say, well, those hard physical sessions are also going to stress you psychologically as well, because that's part of what makes them hard. It's not just that you're tired and your legs are burning, or they're just fatigued from going so long, but it also takes a lot of mental discipline, a lot of mental focus on those longer sessions to really stay focused and to stay dialed into the task at hand, and to be producing good quality strokes after having rode for 50, 60, 90 minutes of steady state. And so you don't want to completely say, oh, well, we're only going to be alternating high physical stress days with high mental stress days. You're also going to have days that are just pure rest, pure swing, that are designed to regenerate and to recover And I think if you do that with your training, you're gonna see a much greater training effect on the several month time scale. You might not see as an immediate effect in terms of a week to week or even within a month, but you will definitely have a better long-term training adaptation where you can continue working, you can continue to see steady improvement in your training from season to season and year to year, because you're working in a much more sustainable manner. So for all those out there that are learning as much as you can, listening to as many people as you can, and trying to create your own training program, think about that. Think about if every day looks very similar and every day feels very similar when you're done with that workout, you know, when you're an hour after your workout, if you're feeling about the same every single day, an hour after your workout, that's a really good sign that you're creating a very vanilla, a very kind of monotonous training program. All right, you want days where you feel like, whoa, that was really good work, I'm really feeling it in my body. And you want other days where you're like, oh, I feel totally fresh, I feel rejuvenated, I feel ready to go for the next session. And if you're doing that, you're gonna find that you're gonna see a lot more training benefits on the long term. So that's it for today's talk. I hope that helped you guys, especially those out there that are kind of doing it on their own, figuring out things, learning as much as you can. Kudos to you, because that's how even the professionals out here got our start, you know, is kind of picking up and reading as many books as we can, listen to as many people, experimenting on ourselves and finding what worked and what didn't, and just trying to understand it. So props to you guys. I've been there myself. It was a fun process, but it was also a very challenging process and a very frustrating process. And if I can you know, throw out a little tips here and there to kind of help you along the way, then I'm happy to do so. So that's it. This is Travis signing off. If this helped, please give it a like. It really does help the channel. YouTube kind of ranks that as higher quality content if people are commenting, ask questions, challenge some of the things I've been saying in the comments, whatever you want. Like the video if you found it helpful, share it, especially if you think other people can benefit from the topic, and subscribe if you want more content like this and you want to get notified and have it show up in your feed. So that's it. This is Travis signing off. Take care, guys. Peace.